Yes. More the merrier. And then
Okay. Okay. Does he know that after the legislators, they're going to be short?
You guys want to do a mic check on this?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
No? You're fine? Okay.
I'll go either way you think. I'm happy to go here.
Just make sure our phone,
My daughter's sick.
Whatever you think.
just make sure our phones.
Whatever you want.
I'll be close. Yeah, I like it.
Okay.
Hey, Nancy.
Okay. We have a plan.
I did.
Okay.
Put on sunscreen too.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah.
Find things you care about. Yeah, I love that.
Everybody's phones are on mute.
Okay.
Good afternoon, and I want to thank all of you for joining us today. And as you see, we have many people up here, and we're probably going to have quite a few people speaking, so I will be very brief. As so many of you who are here today and around the state, I am shocked and saddened to think that after 50 years, a woman's right to choose has been taken away from her. And so for those, although many of you don't look like it, but for those of us who are older than 50 years old, we remember what it was like before that. And quite honestly, I'm afraid for states unlike Connecticut, who has been very forward-thinking about this matter and it protects a woman's right to choose. But in those states where they're changing it, it could go back to very dangerous methods. So that does sadden me. And before I turn this over to our Lieutenant Governor, I do want to just quote from the closing remarks from the Supreme Court justices who dissented. This court betrays its guiding principle. With sorrow, this court, but more for the millions of American women who have today lost a fundamental constitutional protection, we dissent. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to the Lieutenant Governor.
Madam Party Chair, thank you so much for your successful leadership. We are very grateful. Today is a very dark and very devastating day for every woman in this country. It's a day that we've been dreading, but it's a day that we knew was coming. The court's decision demolishes more than 50 years of settled law ensuring women's reproductive freedom and right to privacy. This decision is cruel and unconscionable because it will send doctors to jail for providing life-saving care, and it will turn women into felons. It's cruel and unconscionable because it targets poor women, indigenous women, and women of color. This ruling is cruel and unconscionable because it doesn't mean that women will no longer receive abortions. It just means that many women will no longer have access to safe abortions. It's just outrageous and wrong, and it's sexist, racist, misogynistic, and homophobic. Governor Lamont and I are here to say, with our partners in our state legislature and with our partners in the halls of the U.S. Senate and the United States Congress, that we will be champions of women's reproductive rights. We will champion reproductive freedom, and you can trust us to deliver on that, because my advocacy goes back to the early 1990s when, during my tenure in the legislature, I continuously voted against attacks on our Roe versus Wade law, which is enshrined in our state statutes. And a month ago, not far from here, Governor Lamont signed into law the Reproductive Freedom Act that protects doctors that provide critical medical care, even to women who come from states where that care is illegal, and that law expands access to reproductive care for women, not just in Connecticut, but across our country. Governor Lamont and I want you to know that Connecticut is and will remain a safe harbor. But as we know, our rights are fragile and must be protected at every turn. And so we say today that we are the team that can be trusted to protect the rights of women in Connecticut, because the difference couldn't be more clear between our team and the other team. Bob Stefanowski has said, well, Connecticut already has a Roe versus Wade law. But what he hasn't said is that he will stand up and defend against any attack of our Roe versus Wade law. And all the legislators behind me will tell you that every legislative session, there are attacks and attempts to cut back on our Roe versus Wade law. So let's be extremely clear that ours is the team that says we will stand up and protect our state Roe versus Wade law against any attack. At the same time, Bob Stefanowski is saying that we should cut back on our law, that we should diminish its efficacy. So to the women of our country that are distraught and despairing, come to Connecticut. We will provide the critical health care that you need. And to the voters of Connecticut, it is extremely important that everyone go to the polls knowing which candidates you can trust to protect our essential reproductive and constitutional rights. And it is now my pleasure to introduce our United States Senator Richard Blumenthal, who's been fighting for reproductive freedom since the advent of our state Roe versus Wade law. Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Susan. Governor, if you'll permit me, I'm not going to talk like a lawyer, because this is not a legal decision. This is a political decision. It's outcome driven by a bunch of politicians with robes legislating from the bench. It's outcome driven because the three justices who made the difference here were appointed by Donald Trump, who outsourced his choices to a far right fringe of the Republican Party. And it is deeply political in where it leads, which is more end to fundamental freedom. Let's be very clear about what this decision does. It strips women of freedom to decide when and whether to become pregnant. I heard about this decision about 4 hours ago as I was driving up from eastern Connecticut, having flown back from Washington on a 7 o'clock plane this morning after an exhilarating evening. And I was all set for a celebration with my great colleague, Chris Murphy, who, with me, was going to meet with advocates. And I was angry then. I'm no less angry now. The women of America have a right to be angry and anguished and scared, really scared, because this court is saying you can't control your own bodies. The government will. You have no right to decide when to have a family. The government will decide when you have children. That is so deeply and desperately wrong. Yesterday, the Supreme Court ruled that people carrying guns have near absolute rights. Today it ruled that women making personal health care decisions have no rights. That tells you all you need to know about this Supreme Court. And it is political and personal. Susan's right. I championed the effort 3 decades ago to incorporate, codify Roe v. Wade in Connecticut statutes. We wrote a statute that said, in effect, no matter what the Supreme Court does, you have that protection here in Connecticut. And now I really want to thank our Connecticut legislature, the pro-choice caucus, and all of you for taking the next step and making Connecticut a safe harbor against states like Texas that would put bounties on the heads of providers and women who seek to exercise that right. But here's the stark political fact. My Women's Health Protection Act at the federal level, not a single Republican voted for it just within the past few months. Not a single Republican voted to protect Roe rights in the Women's Health Protection Act. Every single Republican voted for Neil Gorsuch to be confirmed. Every single Republican except one voted for Brett Kavanaugh. Every single Republican except one voted for Amy Coney Barrett. The reason we have this Supreme Court is because of Republicans in the United States Senate. And make no mistake, to the women of Connecticut and the country, the first vote that anybody in the next United States Senate will take, the very first vote, will be for the majority leader if they are in control. And that will be Mitch McConnell, who will lead the United States Senate to a national ban on abortion. And if that happens, forget about Connecticut and its safe harbor. Federal law trumps state law. Federal law overrides Connecticut's safe harbor. So where we go from here is to the ballot box, not only in Connecticut, but around the country. And it will matter as no other choices in your life will matter to protecting the rights that you have now and the rights of your children. And many people have grown up at a time when we took these rights for granted. When I wrote the Women's Health Protection Law 13 years ago, nobody could imagine that Roe v. Wade would be overturned. That's where we are right now. Roe v. Wade is history. And this historic moment is, in the worst way, one that we will remember. And we ought to be angry and anguished and scared about where this Supreme Court is going, because Justice Thomas is talking about overruling Obergefell, eviscerating marriage equality, overruling Griswold v. Connecticut, providing for a ban on contraceptives, interracial marriage, all kinds of privacy rights could well be history along with Roe. This election matters. Elections do have consequences, and vote as if your life depended on it.
Thank you. We have a statement from United States Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro. I am angry. The Republican-packed Supreme Court has discarded science and decades of legal precedent to strip away a woman's right to choose. Make no mistake, this decision puts women's lives at risk. The court's decision today is not about protecting life. It is about taking control of women. I am proud to represent a state that recognizes a woman's freedom of choice, and I will fight every day to make sure that right gets extended to women across this country. Thank you, Rosa DeLauro. And the reason that our congresspeople are not joining us is because they are in session today. So it is now my pleasure to...
They're approving the gun violence prevention package.
There you go. At least some good work is getting done in Washington. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce a fighter for women and equality, Senator May Flexer.
Good afternoon. I'm really sad to be here on this devastating day, and I know that many of us have been here, particularly over the course of the last year, in anticipation of this moment. And it's almost hard to put into words how devastating it is that it's finally here. A right, as has been said, that many of us have taken for granted in this country for nearly 50 years has now disappeared for millions of our fellow Americans. And I think it's important to take a moment to think about what that really means. It means that right now in this country, doctors and their patients are unsure as to whether or not certain kinds of contraceptives can now be prescribed because of the state laws that went into effect when this Supreme Court decision came down. There are women in this country who in the days to come may not be able to have the appropriate medical treatment for a miscarriage because their state now outlaws abortion. There are young girls in this country who were raped by their uncles and their fathers, who are forced to carry those pregnancies that resulted from those rapes to term because of this Supreme Court decision. To say that this is devastating is an understatement. I am so grateful that we live here in the state of Connecticut, where, as you've already heard, these rights have been enshrined for decades, and we here in the state legislature, and with the wonderful leadership of Lieutenant Governor Bisowitz and Governor Lamont, are at the forefront of doing everything we can to not just protect access to abortion and full reproductive health care, but to make sure that families can have all the supports they need when they choose to have their own children. In Connecticut, unlike most of this country, sadly, we have paid family and medical leave. We have some of the strongest pregnancy protection laws in the country so that women can continue to work when they choose to be pregnant. We have expanded access to early child care. We have done everything we can to actually be a state where you want to raise a family when that is your choice. But those decisions have happened because of political leadership. And so I want to be really clear about two things that I'm hopeful everyone in our state will take a moment to think about today. First of all, if you're thinking about how privileged you are to live here in the state of Connecticut, then think about the money that some women are going to have to spend and probably don't have to travel across state lines to get reproductive health care. If you are a person who has that money, take that money today and donate it to the incredible organizations that are galvanized right now to make sure those scenarios I was talking about earlier don't have to happen. Please, if you have that capacity, give that money. And secondly, this is all about politics. It matters at every level of government who is elected. As you've already heard here today, our governor's race could not be more clear. You have a candidate and a team who have been leading this state who are fully committed to ensuring the full spectrum of rights for all people in the state of Connecticut. We have to understand what the choice is this November. Just a few short years ago, this state legislature was nearly tied, and the number of people who are against abortion rights elected to this legislature had grown to very large numbers. And thanks to some of the brave women standing behind me, we've started to turn the tide in the other direction. But I think it's critical for everyone to know that elections matter. We had razor-thin majorities here in the state legislature just 3 years ago. That could very quickly go back. It is critical who your state representative and who your state senator are. Know where they stand on these issues and demand that they answer you. And make sure you vote and get your friends and neighbors to vote this November. And then I can't emphasize clearly enough, as Senator Blumenthal said, it matters who's in Congress. Everyone knows the razor-thin majorities that we have in the United States Congress. Our senators are 2 of every single of the 50 deciding votes in the state Senate, in the United States Senate. All of the things we've done here in Connecticut could quickly disappear if we don't send back all 5 of our wonderful Democratic members of the House of Representatives and Senator Blumenthal this year and Senator Murphy in the years to come. Elections matter more than ever, and we need more people to be engaged so that we never have to stand here on a devastating day like this when another group of people's rights have been decimated by unelected Supreme Court justices. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Flexer. It's my pleasure to bring up State Representative Kristen McCarthy-Vahey.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor and Governor Lamont and Senator Blumenthal for your leadership. We dissent. And how do we dissent? We vote. Here in Connecticut, we vote for legislation that will help protect our providers and assure that we are a place of refuge for those seeking care, all those seeking care. In Connecticut, we vote for leaders like Susan Bisowitz and Ned Lamont and Dick Blumenthal, who are going to help assure that we have these protections. We vote for leaders who are willing to consider potentially reforms, structural reforms, that may need to happen with our judiciary. And we vote for candidates at every level who are going to support people's rights, who are going to support those who are most vulnerable, and we know that they are most at risk. I'm proud to stand here today with this incredible group of leaders who together we dissent and together we vote.
Thank you. Thank you, State Representative, and now it's my pleasure to bring up State Representative Maria Horn.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor, and I'll try not to repeat all the gratitude that I feel for our Lieutenant Governor, our Senator Dick Blumenthal, and Chris Murphy for all that they are doing for us in Connecticut. The risks are real here today. We are very lucky, not lucky, we have done the work in Connecticut to protect these rights, first of all, to enshrine Roe decades ago, and also to have passed one of the nation's leading pieces of legislation to protect not only the women who live here in Connecticut, but those who are going to travel here to get access to a safe, legal abortion. And make no mistake that what this fight, and those of us, I know many of us standing here have been fighting this. I have certainly been to too many rallies than I want to count. This has always been about access. This is really not honestly about my daughters, who will always be able to access medical care, because my husband and I are going to stand there and make sure that they get access to whatever they need. This is about women who have significant barriers ahead of them and can't access it. And what Connecticut has done is make sure that those barriers get limited every year. And so we pass good, strong laws to protect them. But I tell you what else we need to do here in Connecticut and elsewhere, and that is make sure that these services are actually provided in the communities that you live. And that means talking to your healthcare systems and understanding, because at least in my community, The practices that provide abortion services are also the ones that are providing health care to women who choose to continue those pregnancies. We need to make sure that all of those healthcare systems continue to provide those services in our communities. Otherwise, our laws are meaningless. So we have plenty of fight to do on the local, state, and federal level, and thank God I live in Connecticut.
Maria, thank you so much. It's my pleasure to bring up Representative Ann Hughes.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. We have been elected for such a time as this, and we knew this day was coming, which is why at the beginning of this session, like Senator Flexer said, we mobilized the Reproductive Rights Caucus, and we got to work passing landmark legislation to protect our providers, our families, and even people who are seeking refuge from other states. Is it enough? No. This is about power and control that the Supreme Court has seized, and we must answer with the public power, the people power, not just in voting, but in raising our voices, saying we will not let this stand. And I am so proud to be standing with representatives from the Reproductive Rights Caucus and this leadership and take this fight to the streets, to the rallies, to the offices on every level, because we must represent the people power and show that it is greater to hold in check this out-of-control Supreme Court. Thank you.
State Representative Stephanie Thomas.
Yes, we knew this day was coming. Yes, we vote. So I'm going to talk about what happens after we vote. There are 364 other days of the year. And by the time we read about something in the newspaper, it's often too late. So I would like to put a call of action out to all of us to pay attention before things get to the newspaper, before you cast your vote. You have to do your research. You have a voice in what happens. These people behind me are not here by accident. People were paying attention, they knew what they stood for, and they were elected, and that's why we are here to protect your rights. Not everyone is so fortunate. Spread the word. Our democracy takes 365 days of year of activity. Write letters, give money, make phone calls, go canvassing. People do not get elected by luck, they get elected by hard work. And we now see more than ever with everything. I've now spoken at more rallies vigils than I care to attend in my entire life. We know what it takes to win, so let's get out there and win our country back. Thank you.
Eric Russell.
Thank you, Susan. Every cycle we get up here and we talk about this being the most important election cycle of our lives. And today is the prime example of why that is the case. Every November, when we go to the ballot box, it's about putting people in positions to lead that genuinely represent our state and our country. And what we've seen here today is 6 justices on a Supreme Court make a decision that is ultimately against the will of the people and reverse 50 years of legal precedent. And that's because there's been decades-long strategic plan to put anti-choice, ultra-conservative justices on the bench. And we're ultimately, millions of Americans across the country are going to suffer because of those decisions. And as Lieutenant Governor mentioned, huge portion of those women who are most going to be impacted are women in poverty, women of color, people in the LGBTQ community. And as this decision outlines, it's just the tip of the iceberg. Marriage equality is up right now. Access to contraceptives. We're so fortunate that we live in a state, and I'm so grateful to Representative Matt Blumenthal and Representative Gilchrist and so many members here of the Reproductive Rights Caucus that have led the way to protect women's rights here in Connecticut. Similarly, so many people who have led the charge on protecting the LGBTQ community and marriage equality in this state. But it doesn't happen unless we do our part individually, and we get out there and we mobilize and we make sure that we're electing people with our value set and who believe in the rights that we do up and down the ballot, that we make sure that we have pro-choice judges being appointed to the bench, and that we ultimately change the tide, because it's our responsibility and it's our time to do the work. So thank you.
Thank you, Eric. It's my pleasure to introduce Senator Saud Anwar.
What Supreme Court did today was pass a death sentence for women. The results will be death of women, especially the ones who are unable to afford and unable to have the access to safe abortion. This was a safe abortion stop, and women will be finding other ways to try to get the abortion, and they will die. And just think about that's what's going on, and that's the results. The second thing I want you to remember is that elections matter, as has been said, and it is going to be critical for everyone to know about who you're voting for and where they stand, because the results are going to matter, as we have seen. Thank you.
Thank you. The mayor of our capital city, Mayor Luke Bronin.
Mr. Lieutenant Governor, I want to start by echoing the gratitude that's been expressed to our legislators standing here and so many others, along with our governor and lieutenant governor, who have acted with such courage and foresight and strength and clarity of values to make sure that women's rights are protected here in Connecticut, even as they are stripped nationally by the Supreme Court. But as Senator Murphy said just a little while ago, make no mistake, 2 years from now, if the Republicans control the House and the Senate and the presidency, they will enact a national abortion ban. They will overturn the rights that these legislators and this governor have put in law here in Connecticut. And it won't stop there. This is the outcome, as has been said, of decades of work to cede control to an extreme minority in the Republican Party. This is why Mitch McConnell denied Merrick Garland a vote. This is why they ran through the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett. This is why almost all the justices who voted today to take this right away, at best, dissembled in their confirmation hearings. They were targeting this day. But it's not going to end here, because Clarence Thomas already laid out the roadmap. It's not just a woman's right to choose that's at stake. It's every right. It's the right to marry who you love. It's the right to plan a family and use contraception. What we've seen from this Supreme Court is a Supreme Court that is hell-bent on rolling back just about every right other than the right to carry a gun. And that right they leave unrestricted. So we've got our work to do, because the way we fight back, and the only way we fight back, is at the ballot box. And we've got to do it before they do too much damage to the right to vote. So this year, here in Connecticut, we've got to elect Governor Lamont and Lieutenant Governor Bysewicz again. We've got to elect them with strong and clear margins. We've got to send Senator Blumenthal back with a massive margin to send a message. And with any time and energy we got to spare, we've got to make sure that we're not only making sure that every single one of our legislators standing here and every member of the Democratic caucus in the House and Senate here in Connecticut gets reelected, but we've got to see where we can make a difference in other states too. This has been a decades-long fight to roll these rights back. We have to mobilize and make phone calls and knock on doors and make sure that every American understands what's at stake.
Thank you.
And now our fearless leader, Governor Ned Lamont.
till a few hours ago, Roe v. Wade and women's reproductive freedoms and choices were the law of the land. And that's no longer the case. I can guarantee you it's going to stay the law of the state of Connecticut right here. That's something you can count upon. You can count upon it with Susan and I, no questions about it, no rolling back, no little restrictions, no slippery slopes. We are going to protect that right, and I can't do it unless you re-elect each and every one of the people behind me here. Look, as May said, it's a close call. You have a different governor, you have a different lieutenant governor, you have a different legislature. We have a law. It says Roe v. Wade will be our law here in Connecticut, no matter what the feds do. That's as good as our legislature and governor and lieutenant governor. This makes an enormous difference. And while I'm at it, this guy, Dick Blumenthal, has been trying for years to make sure that Roe v. Wade is the law of the land by legislation. And you've got to make sure he gets back. You've got to make sure he gets back with a big vote, loud and clear, and make sure anybody running against him or us, don't let them get squishy. Don't say I generally support it, but there's some restrictions I'm willing to consider. No, I want you to be clear on this. And as Luke said, look, it's a woman's right to choose. It's about gay rights. It's about contraception. Our fundamental liberties are at risk. They're at risk in a way that I haven't seen in my life, and I've been around a long time. And I just want you to know, on a personal note, I talked to my family, you know, my wife was in tears. She just couldn't believe that this actually happened. You know, my daughters said, what the hell? Actually, they're a little more graphic than that. I thought this was the law. I cannot believe that people could roll back fundamental freedom. My sister, you know, Kim just said, I always thought the courts protected our freedoms and protected our rights. And this is going the other direction. And I will say one thing on a personal note, and I usually don't get all that partisan, but I am so sick of these sermons from Republicans talking about freedom and liberty and small government. This is the biggest encroachment on our freedoms I've had in my lifetime, and it's not going to happen in Connecticut. Not going to happen here. And just leave with a message that I'm so proud of the state. I think we lead on so many of the important values. That's why we're here. We send the message around the country. That's why Dick and Chris were able to get some small compromises when it comes to gun safety laws. This is why we're the state, one of the first states in the country to allow gay marriage, to say, get government out of the way. Why are politicians getting between me and somebody I love? And when it comes to choice, why are politicians getting between me and my doctor? Not in Connecticut, not on our watch, not here.
Well, I just want to thank all of our speakers today. I think you're getting the message of how the Democrats stand in Connecticut, and I can promise you this year our state party is going to be working very hard to make sure we don't just re-elect all of our state senators, state reps, and all of our constitutionals and congressionals and our senator, but we will also be reaching out to other states that need help, and we will let you know which states need help so you can help them, whether it's money or by making calls as well. But just remember, Connecticut, we need to keep it strong here first. Now, are there any questions?
Now let's just up the protections for black women in Connecticut. Let's pass legislation that's going to call the omnibus tax of 2021 here in Connecticut. That's what I'm asking you to do. Protect black women, protect women of color. You understand?
Yes.
60 out of 100,000 black women die in America giving birth.
Yep.
20, opposed to 20 of women who are not of color. So let's stand up for black women and women of color here in Connecticut as well, okay? That's all I'm going to ask.
You want to take over the questions? Any other questions?
Any questions from the media?
Okay. Thank you
Really?
all.
Thank you.